Are you trying to establish your brand as a thought leader? Start a podcast, invite industry experts to be guests on your show, and watch your brand become the prime resource for decision makers in your industry. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy. Today I've got with me Joshua Schnoll, VP of Marketing at AppDirect. Joshua, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Nikki?
I am well. It's a little gray for Austin, but I'm making it work. I got my toasty Seattle weather flannel on today, so
your grunge look.
My grunge look, yes. I'm a 90s girl. Anyway, so you're going to talk to us about the importance of sharing tribal knowledge for sales success. And I'm really excited to get into that. But before we jump in, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your background and what you guys have been up to over at AppDirect these days.
Sure. So, I've been at AppDirect a little over 2 years. Before that, I worked at FICO, heading up the product marketing team. And before that, I'd been at Microsoft for a number of years in a variety of different roles. And at AppDirect, we are a digital commerce platform helping all different kinds of companies really to transform their commerce. So sometimes they're telecommunication companies, folks like Deutsche Telekom, Comcast, or Telstra, where they're really looking to transform and not just sell sort of their core broadband services, but maybe sell software or infrastructure as a service. For software companies, we've got, different kinds of folks, ADP, which many folks know for their payroll processor, but they're also a huge software company in the HR space. And basically we developed, kind of an app store in a box kind of solution for them. So they build out their entire ecosystem of third-party developers. And then we also work with a lot of manufacturing companies, big companies like, ABB, Honeywell and others to really help them launch, digital initiatives where, they may not have an iPhone, but they've got like a giant manufacturing device, a giant power transformer or something, but they want to have developers build apps on those kind of devices. They want commerce to flow through them and all that. And so we help companies do all those different kinds of commerce transformations.
All the cool invisible infrastructure stuff.
That's right. That's us.
The behind the scenes, the unsung heroes. But what I really wanted to get into with you is this idea of sharing tribal knowledge for sales success, because I, having been in several different sales roles for about the past decade, we talked a little bit offline about the different sort of sales types of sales reps. I think I've maybe been one of each of them at different parts of my career, but I'll have you go ahead and dig into that for us. Go ahead and sort of lay it out for us, who those different roles are and what they tend to be like.
Sure. I mean, I think every organization, recognizes, and there's been, I'm not sure how, like a million books and studies, et cetera, written about the different kinds of reps. But, different reps have different styles and different techniques that really help them, get ahead. You may have kind of your numbers rep, and this is someone who's just out there basically playing the odds. They are seeding and they are making more calls, having more meetings with more, prospects than anybody else out there. Knowing that they're going to just play the numbers and they're going to be able to convert, a number of those. Mm-hmm. You've also got kind of like the relationship representative who's all about, kind of the schmoozing aspect of things, et cetera, sort of building up that, positive relationship, with the prospects. And then you've got, the contrarian, it's what I think I'll call sort of like the challenger sale, kind of model there, where someone who's like looking to really challenge the customer thinking and really kind of push the needle, understanding that customer business and pushing it, with those customers. And I think there's certain aspects of each one of those kinds of roles that you want a little bit of that in, a variety of your different kinds of reps. And so there's, not just sort of the style of the reps, but then you also have kind of the skill sets that are associated with them. And sort of making sure that, maybe you've got some reps that are really able to sort of just tell passionate customer story about what they're doing, with your technology or whatever product that you may be selling. Or there are others that are just fantastic at kind of handling objections or, managing like the negotiation situation or whatever it may be.
Sure.
And you want to make sure that you're able to share that knowledge, easily across, your sales force, which are probably spread out, all over the, maybe the country or all over the world.
How? Tell me the things. I've been one of the people who struggle with this, and I've seen plenty of folks struggle. I've been on a sales floor, a really high call volume environment where there was, that young woman who was making 150 phone calls to, her neighbor's 75, and the 75 call a day guy just had a different skill set and it was working out. But certainly there has to be some way to take, this and that, the 75 caller who's just good at, the relationship thing, and the 150 caller who's got that grit to make those 150 calls. How do we get them together? How do we have them rub off on each other?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it depends a little bit on the size of the organization. Obviously,
Sure.
if you got like a relatively small sales organization, you can do a little bit more of this organically. So, maybe you've got kind of a weekly sales enablement call. Maybe it's about an hour long. People can talk through like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what's been working for me, et cetera. But as you begin to scale as an organization, it's really difficult to do that. I mean, first thing that comes into play, even if you don't have that large of an organization, maybe you start moving to different time zones. So all of a sudden that becomes one of the initial challenges that you've got in play there. And so probably one of the best things that you can do as you begin to move into that larger environment is really get a technical platform in place that allows you to, have a sales rep. There's video conferencing, all these technologies are so readily available today. It's really easy for someone just to go in, record some of what they're doing and then be able to share that out with a variety of different folks. Now, there's a host of different kinds of sales enablement platforms that allow, they've got sort of these coaching modules or other kinds of things sort of built into the platform. And that can be something that can be really critical for success, because if you're allowed, you sort of upload that piece in there and then built into the platform, you've got the ability for perhaps their manager or some of the marketers or other people in the organization to really comment on that and say, oh, wow, hey, this is really fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing. And you can get a certain amount of virality in that kind of within the sales organization. You also can kind of, within some of those sales folks, it's like, oh, hey, I'm getting immediate recognition for this recording I did on this particular topic. And obviously that's very gratifying, within a sales organization, to see other folks saying, oh, hey, that's great content. That's really helping me, to be successful. And so I think technology is definitely a key to make this successful.
Yeah, I think you're right. What I'm wondering though is when you're hiring and when you're recruiting for these sales roles and you're identifying, is it possible to identify straight away what that skill set is, especially if we're talking about maybe SDR or AE or maybe, entry level sales folks? Is it possible to identify those? And have you seen folks giving preference to one over the other? I mean, I have my thoughts. I've certainly in the startup scene seen folks give preference to the 150. If you're willing to do the 150 calls a day, they feel like they can teach everything else. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that depends a great deal on your sales leader. I think one of the things that has worked for us here at AppDirect is really around, as a company, and I think a lot of startups and, technology companies do this today. You've got a core set of values. So whether it's your sales organization, your marketing organization, your engineering organization, wherever it may be, you've got a core set of values as a company. And kind of within those values, at AppDirect, we have, in terms of, True North being one of the ones that's like, look, you've got to make the right long-term decisions for the company. And part of that gets to, all right, if I'm going to be willing to help others within the team to be successful, while maybe short-term that takes away a little bit from, my activity as a sales rep, I know for the long-term, for the broader organization, that's something that's really important. And hiring, sales leaders, leaders of SDR teams and others who have that mentality about doing the right thing more broadly for the company, I think is one of the things that has helped us at AppDirect be successful in this way.
I love it. That's the kind of attitude that's going to elevate this profession. For sure. For sure. It was one of the other things that you and I sort of talked about offline as far as how we get this tribal knowledge out there. I really liked is this idea of sort of this Motown version of vetting what we're doing, whether it be handling objections or telling stories and getting other, parts of the business involved in sort of figuring out what is the perfect pitch, what's the perfect balance of these skills, I guess, for everybody to then be applying, right? And so I use the Motown reference, meaning they would, play a song, have everybody listen to it, from the secretary to the AR guy, and then at the end, would I spend, my money on this record or a sandwich? Right. And then the ones that and that's how they would figure out what would happen versus just sort of being in an echo chamber. Because I think when you're talking about salespeople, that's a slippery slope. So talk a little bit about that, those examples of, how to take the objection handling skilled rep and disseminate that, to the rest of the team or the storytelling rep or whatever have you.
No, absolutely. So I'll start actually with a little bit on the storytelling. And I mean, obviously one of the most important skills for a sales rep is the ability to tell your customer stories and to be able to tell that customer story as if they were the ones who actually closed that deal. And so one of the things that we had done is, first you've got to get alignment between the sales leadership, the sales, folks themselves, your marketing team and, product marketing and your sales enablement team that like, hey, we're going to all work together, on this project. And, what we did here is we, went through, worked with a bunch of the sales reps. We kind of built the material for 3 particular customer case stories. So we took one of our telco customers, company in Canada. We took one of our manufacturing, one of our software companies. And kind of we built out like, hey, here are some notes around what this would be. And then we had a number of the reps actually go and, pitch that particular story to a pretty diverse audience. So similar kind of to your Motown model, where we had a whole bunch of different folks kind of listening to that story. And we had each one of the sales reps actually go and kind of pitch this. And so it was able to, get a broad swath of like, hey, how people are telling the story. What are some of the nuances and interpretations that are associated with that? And, through that, we were able to kind of what we call kind of build the perfect customer story and then, record that. And so we were then able to say, okay, based on kind of these particular customer stories, we shared that out with everyone in terms of, hey, this is what an ideal customer story would look like to tell those different stories. And now we're beginning to start scaling that for other ones. So people know the key elements that are associated with that. So obviously, what are the things that make stories entertaining? The emotion, the interest. And so making sure that you're not just like, well, this teleco, did this, that. It's like have some kind of emotional connection in terms of what they're trying to do. So in one particular case, they're really trying to help small businesses, be more successful. And so if you can sort of get into that emotional hook, it makes the story a lot more interesting. And so that was one of sort of the key learnings and the key pieces that kind of a lot of the reps, began to sort of take from that. And so that was one way that we sort of played that out in terms of telling customer stories. And we're looking to use the platform that we have to allow more of them to record that, load it up, and then have sort of this global, town hall or group of people then begin to provide feedback as to, hey, this is what you're doing well, this is how to improve, and then we'll put even more and more of these sort of ideal customer stories out there for others to learn from.
I love it. That is so valuable to walk into an organization that has that kind of structure, system around playbook, around that sort of thing that goes beyond just saying, hey, you do this, but showing, hey, this is what has been working. And if you do this, between math and science, it's going to turn out in your favor. I think, man, I think people are missing that a lot of the time. And it's so key. So key. So you guys are doing sort of the same thing when it comes to objection handling, that same sort of applying it to a system.
Yeah, exactly. So in the objection handling one, we're doing things a little bit differently. So we've got, each month we're highlighting a particular objection, and then we're having each one of the reps kind of record, through, just a quick video, sort of how they handle that particular objection. And then we're going through and working across the team, and everyone's kind of evaluating, okay, hey, which are the key pieces? And so we're going to then pull together of like, hey, this is what we think is just the absolute best way to handle this particular objection. And then so we're crowdsourcing a little bit on one end, and then kind of putting that together to give like, hey, here's the top way to handle this, or this objection.
Did you guys, before you started this, have anything in place to sort of measure the baseline from where you started into where you are now, and be able to sort of look at any concrete differences from, then and now?
So we certainly can look at sort of the way that folks are telling some of these stories. One of the things that we actually did this past, I guess it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had some of the sales reps actually tell these stories at our town hall, because it's not only, just from a sales rep standpoint, but, for the customer story side of it, you're at a cocktail party or wherever you are, having, all of our engineers, our finance folks, whomever it is, to actually be able to tell some of the stories about what it is that we do, it's really a great way to sort of kind of get that out there. So that was one thing that was actually, we got really positive sort of getting to the sort of the measurement. There was a huge amount of positive feedback about sort of getting those stories out there. In terms of measuring the success related to sales, obviously we continue to look at our core metrics in terms of the, length of time in funnel for, particular stages and those kinds of things. So, we keep measuring, on that, close rates and all of those different pieces. But I don't know that we have a very a specific metric around like telling customer stories. It folds into one element of the broader piece.
And I'm talking to a marketing guy, which is different. This is a totally different answer than what I would have gotten if I were talking from the SVP of sales. But that, I think you brought up alignment earlier. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, what you guys are doing, or if folks who are applying this whole idea of having a system, and they hear me say this on this podcast all the time, they're probably sick of me saying it, but going beyond alignment and going to sales and marketing harmony, so because it's better for everyone. I believe it in my soul, but that's really what you're doing here. And so even if it's not something that's, where you can say this many opportunities happen because we told stories, which I agree would be really sort of muddy and difficult to quantify, I would bet that as a culture on that sales floor and as a company overall, folks are just feeling better going into conversations. And like I said, having done, sales roles for a long time, I cannot tell you how valuable that is. A lot of it just comes down to, you posted something the other day that was like, being happy at your job is about knowing yourself.
Yep.
And it's so true. So being able to have like on hand stories I can tell, on hand ways to overcome objections, it is money. So I'm super glad that you came to talk to me about this today. And so like we talked about offline, there's a thing we're doing on these podcasts on the B2B Growth Show, because Sweetfish Media endeavors to be a learning hub for the B2B and SaaS community. We are asking everyone who comes on our show to talk about some learning resource, whether it's a book you read, a blog, a podcast you listen to, hopefully not one with me rambling, but that's particularly interesting to you that you'd like to share with the community. What do you got?
Sure. So I actually recently reread John Doerr's great book on OKRs called Measure What Matters. We've been kind of working through with our OKRs, as we did our planning process a little while ago. It just, came back. I remembered, a whole bunch of, different details really around, driving rigor around that process, et cetera. It's a fantastic book. I'd read it, a while ago, but it was great to reread it. Highly recommend it.
I'm a rereader myself, so I get it. And are we talking actual pages between fingers, or are you listening? You can tell me. Is it an audiobook? Are you an audiobook?
Oh, no. So I actually had the physical book, so went back and reread that one.
I'm a listener. I think I have a few books that I have to feel pages between my fingers, but they're like mostly like young adult. I don't know if you can see my bookshelf here. There's regretfully a copy of Twilight there. And The Great Gatsby. These are the books I actually read over and over again. Anyway, I digress. This has been really great. How can folks connect with you, Joshua?
You can definitely ping me up on LinkedIn, just at Joshua Schnoll, or at email joshua.schnoll@appdirect.com.
All right, there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with.
That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.